Hello retro fans, long time no video, and I'm really sorry for this, but I was so involved in a lot of real life things, so to say, and basically hadn't had any chance to work on video content or any projects or something like this. But I'm trying to catch up right now, so this is going to be kind of an easy episode, just some chit chat about what's going on right now and addressing one of the probably most popular topics right now, and basically just trying to find back to all of my stuff. And most of the things I'm working on is basically getting all those FPGASID adapter orders out now. I have created an online form in Google Form to collect all the, let's say, orders, addresses, email, all that stuff, the options for the adapters. And I'm trying to get them all packed right now. And this form feeds data into a Google Sheet, and this Google Sheet is doing all the calculations for the options and postage and packaging and all that things, and it's sending out an email automatically to all the people who has responded to the form. So I'm pretty happy that this workflow has worked quite well so far, and I do not have to go through all that things step by step manually. And basically I have already some examples how this is going to look like. So basically this is how the assembly kit looks like, and that's basically the two FPGASID adapter, and that's not so complicated and can be shipped quite easily. And well, the PCB alone is going to be this very same package without the additional parts. But the main thing I was really struggling with was how to ship the build adapters. And so I ordered a couple of small boxes, and the main issue, the main thing I really had many concerns about is this small little pogo pin here, because they break very easily. This is really a big problem, and therefore I had to find a package that kind of protects it very well. And I ended up with something like this. So that's going to be a small box with some foam inside. So it's not ESD compliant, but it's no ESD sensitive parts on it. Anyway, and by just closing the box, now I'm able to ship this quite well. And the next thing is going to be a slightly bigger box if I have to send two adapters like this. So this is going to be the mixed replacement adapter and a single FPGASID adapter. And here we have the very same issue, very sensitive pogo pins here and there, but with some foam, everything is going to be okay. And last but not least, the biggest thing in this whole story, that's the two FPGASID adapter, and very same principle. So we got two pogo pins on the top and lots of socket connectors on the bottom, but inside the box with some protective foam cover. Everything will hopefully work fine. So I will post a link to the form in the description section. So if you are interested in to get something like this, preferably as a PCB or assembly kit, because I have so many kits to assemble right now that this will take quite a while. So I beg your pardon if this is going to be taking a little bit longer than expected. This whole thing is quite well, challenging for a single person project thingy. And basically the next thing I'm working on is a couple of Keyman 64s, and I'm still having some issues with this key matrix multiplex, forgot the name, thingy, but I'm making some progress. But the major concern or the major trouble I was facing is how to wire this whole thing. So on this side, the keyboard connector is connected, everything works fine so far, but this side needs to be connected to the C64. And I was testing a couple of options, and one of the, let's say, old-fashioned method is to use an old IDE cable and hard disk cable from the PC time before we had SATA cables or something like this. But they are pretty long most of the time and not very flexible and pretty hard to use. And I went on using so-called DuPont cables, but unfortunately the DuPont connector, I don't have one here right now, but let's just grab one. Looks like this. Is indeed a very interesting thing. It fits very well to a single pin and on the other side as well, but this kind of, how are we going to call this, housing or whatever, is 2.65 millimeters in width, and adding them side by side creates the problem that you run out of space after a couple of pins. So getting all that 19 connections established is a bit painful. And but the interesting thing is that those cables are already coming with those connectors crimped on, and this saves a lot of work. So the idea was to create a new connector housing, I don't know, and to use the same kind of cable but get rid of those original black parts here. So I started to prototype a little bit, and this is one of the first examples I have created. And here I can easily remove this from this whole thing. Well, perhaps not so easy, but basically here we go. And I can put it back even like this, and it fits very well, and it has this the correct dimension. So I created a bigger prototypes, and these were just some test examples. As you can see, I have some warping here on this edge, and it doesn't look so nice from the print quality, and all those little notches here are breaking away quite easily. So I created the next version of it, and basically it looks like this. So it's a little bit bigger, it's more material here. The notches are a little bit more robust, but still tend to brittle a little bit. But getting those cables inserted into those new connectors is working quite fine. They fit pretty tight, but I mean, the main reason is to stay there. And just to be on the safe side, I added some kind of super glue to it so that those notches are not going to break away. And now I can easily connect my Keyman 64 to my C64s, and everything is working fine. So this is especially made for one of my friends from Italy, and he's kind of desperately waiting for all the stuff already. And I promise I'm working on it, and I'm probably getting this stuff done pretty soon. So much about all this stuff I'm actually working on. And now let's come to the fun part of this video. And while catching up with all the retro-related news over the last few weeks, I missed a couple of things. But there was one major thing that has caused a lot of buzz in this retro scene, and this is the Super Mario Bros. Release for the C64. And with no surprise, Nintendo has already started to take action, and the game is quite hard to get if you are not very familiar with the different sources of the C64 world. But basically, with some Googling, you will find it still. And the interesting thing that really caught my my attention was the support of faster systems, let's call it like this, because the NES system is running at I think 1.7 megahertz, something like this, and the C64 runs at 1 megahertz, and then there must be some kind of trade-offs, let's say, in terms of speed. And yes, indeed, if you play the Super Mario release for the C64 on a standard C64, you have to face some slowdowns every now and then and here and there. But if you run this on a C128, for example, or on a C64 equipped with a SuperCPU or with a Turbo Chameleon, then you can use the 2 MHz mode, and then you will have almost no slowdowns at all. I mean, the original version on the NES is slowing down here and there every now and then as well. But basically, this is now kind of, well, let's say, similar to the turbo version of the C64. And the next thing I was really interested to test is the twin SID support. So basically, this release is supporting 2 SIDs, and this was one of the things I was really looking forward to test, because, I mean, you know already, I'm really addicted to multiple SID setups, and therefore this was really something I had to address. And basically, let's talk about the twin SID setup in just a few minutes, and let's come back to the main thing. And I mean, the original Super Mario Bros. Runs on an, let's say, NTSC system, so it's a 60 Hz game, and therefore the speed wouldn't be the very same on a standard C64 PAL system. And therefore I thought, well, I have to test this on an NTSC system, and I had to go through all my IC boxes, because I just remembered that I had some 6567 VIC2 NTSC ICs somewhere, and I had to go through my boxes, and basically I found 3 of them, and one of it is completely broken. It's not working at all. One is working a little bit. It's missing a couple of things, and characters are messed up and all that things, which is a little bit sad, because this is this very nice ceramic version. But well, unfortunately, it's pretty old already. But finally, I found a working version of a 6567 VIC2 NTSC chip, and I implanted this on my Reloaded MK2. I have tested this on a Reloaded MK1 as well, and it works there too. And the next thing was to get this combined with the Turbo Chameleon. And I'm just going to show you this without myself. And this is the main setup I have created to test the Super Mario Bros. Game on the C64. And as you can see, that's the Turbo Chameleon version 2. And I have tested this with 2 ARM SIDs, as well as with the FPGASID on the single FPGASID adapter. I really have to try to stick to this description, because I have changed this in the middle and this has confused a couple of people. So that's basically the adapter that works with 1 FPGASID on a dual socket board. And this works fine as well. We're going to listen to this in a few minutes. And I have connected my Nunchuck 64 adapter using this not original Nintendo Entertainment System classic wireless controller, because here I have the benefit that the button layout is kind of graded in a way that I can use the A button for jumping and B button for fire, which is pretty nice for arcade games. And Last but not least, I have to admit it wasn't working out of the box. So I had a lot of issues at the very beginning, and the main thing was just to get this Turbo Chameleon working together with the two SIDs properly, and getting all those NTSC stuff synced to my capturing setup. So I had to create a new OBS profile that everything I'm capturing right now is captured with 60 Hertz instead of 50 Hertz, what's basically my standard setup. And at the end I had to learn that I have to configure the Turbo Chameleon in a certain way as well, so that we have some dual SID capabilities available as well. So I think that's basically enough of chatting. Let's go straight to the Turbo Chameleon. I'm going to go briefly to the options which are required to get this game to run on two SIDs, and then we may have a short gameplay session for, well, entertainment purpose only. So the very first thing I had to do was go to the settings menu and set the turbo to Turbo D030 bit on option, because this is used to switch between the 1 MHz and the turbo mode. That's the very first thing. And then the next thing, if you're going to use the VGA output of your Turbo Chameleon, then you have to set this to 60 Hertz, obviously. And in the emulation settings here, we have to set the VIC2 type to NTSC as well. This is probably not required if you run this on a normal C64 board, but if you use the Turbo Chameleon in standalone mode, then you have to set this to NTSC here as well. And the next thing I was really struggling with was the SID emulation. Basically I had set this to mono because I thought, well, I have two kind of real SIDs and therefore I do not want to have any SID emulation at all. But it wasn't working, so I had to set this to stereo at D4XX, and I had to set the real stereo chip to the real address D420 as well. So the SID type is probably not really important if you run this with kind of real SID or SID replacements, but if you want to use the Turbo Chameleon in standalone mode, then you have to set the SID type here accordingly. And that was basically all I had to do for getting this running in stereo mode. And now we can simply go to our directory, and then here we can go for the Super Mario Bros. 64 released by Zero Page, which is kind of funny writing. And this is available as a cartridge version as well as a disc version. I always recommend using cartridge versions because they load even faster and you have no slowdowns in between because you have to load some parts of the game. And now let's jump into the game. And here we go. This is Super Mario Bros. 64, released in 2019, and as you can see, 2012 to 2019. The Zero Page was working for almost 7 years on this one. And as you can see, system detected ICOM Turbo Chameleon 64 NTC recommended version, original 60 FPS. So everything is quite fine for this state. The only thing we have to change right now is to set this to 2 SIDs. And we do so by using our gamepad. And now we can test the 2 SID setup as well. And we should have some test sound on the left and on the right. And basically now we are ready to go. And I bet this is going to be a very funny exercise because if you are a frequent visitor to my channel, you know that I'm not very skillful at playing games, but well, let's give it a try and see how much progress we can have with this one. So now we can choose between 1 and 2 player game, and let's go for the 1 player game. And let's go. So I have to admit, I have never played Super Mario Bros. That much. I never had one of the older consoles from Nintendo, and I got in contact with this game on the Nintendo Wii the very first time. And basically, I think I had some of the versions on the Game Boy, but I'm not sure which one it was, so... Oops. We got a mushroom back, so we are at full size again. So the game looks and feels pretty well, real to me. I mean, I'm not an expert on Super Mario Bros, so I wouldn't probably spot any differences at all. It feels smooth, and it feels slippy as most of the jump and runs coming from Nintendo universe. So I'm having a hard time getting Mario on those places where I want to have him, and that's probably the main challenge for those games, especially for me. So, but as I said, it feels very good, it sounds very good, and I missed the flag at the highest point. Well, lack of practice, I would say. And if you are familiar with the Gianna sisters on the C64, most of those levels are very familiar, so it's probably not so hard to play at all. And it's just a matter of getting adapted to those new characters and paying attention to the movements and all that things. So basically, it is very nice. As I have mentioned already, Nintendo started to take kind of legal actions against pages who were or which were kind of providing download links for this game because they are forced to do so. So it's probably not really just a bad will. It is more a thing by law. And as I said, if you are familiar with the C64 scene, and if you are a little bit kind of, let's say, skillful with Google or other search engines, it's not so hard to find, and it's probably easier to find than to play. And I really recommend having a look at this release, because it's really fantastic to have this on the C64. And perhaps when I find the time, I will spend some more minutes playing Super Mario Bros. On the C64. So, as you can see, the NTSC version works very well on, let's say, a European board. Although I had some kind of troubles to get all that stuff set up properly. But at the end I made it, and perhaps we're going to see some more NTSC stuff in the future. Oh, we missed this one, interesting. I'm not sure whether the original version is doing the very same, but anyway, not going to play this so much longer. And basically, that's all for the Super Mario part. So basically, that's what I have to say for this one. And as a very last thing, before we're going to kind of end this episode, I'm going to show you what I have done in the last week, because I think that's pretty funny and perhaps a little bit uncommon. I was operating an excavator because we had to dig a kind of pit for a natural gas tank. And that's not just a small kind of hole in the ground. No, it's a 6 feet deep and about I think 5 feet wide and 18, 19 feet long hole. So in European metrics, it is about 2 meters deep and 1.65, 1.7 meters wide and almost 6 meter long. So it's really indeed a huge pit we had to create here, and then we had to fill this with sand, and we got the tank, and then we had to put in more sand, and then we had to recreate all this landscape around this, because you can imagine that this is indeed a lot of soil you get out of the ground, and this needs to be kind of well aligned properly around this whole thing, so that we get our good kind of surrounding back. And we did some additional work on the lightning protection, all that things. So at the end we had even more work than expected, but basically it was a very interesting exercise, and well, it was very demanding. So riding and operating an excavator is not as easy as it sounds, because this is a very kind of a brutal machine. It shakes a lot, it vibrates a lot, and it was very warm as well, very unusual for April. So we had 5 or 6 days straight with sun and temperatures about 25 degrees Celsius. And you may imagine that this machine is producing a lot of heat as well. It's a diesel engine, and well, yeah, I have to admit I was a little bit exhausted after those work week. But as I said, now I'm trying to catch up with most of the projects, and trying to get back to topics we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, like the dead test cartridge scenario, which was one of the things we had on the list of things. And I was working on a special episode about the Turbo Chameleon version 2, because there's already a new alpha beta core in production, which is going to address a couple of turbo related things, some improvements here and there. And I've learned that there is a new Amiga mini mic core for the Turbo Chameleon version 2 available as well. So I'm going to test this and see whether this is going to whether this will address a couple of issues I found with the first core. So a lot of things in this area are going on as well. And I'm still have in mind that I started probably about 5 or 6 months ago to test all those SID replacements which are available right now, like the SwinSID Ultimate, the ARM SID, FPGASID. So I had created some kind of example sounds and example videos to compare them against each other. But fortunately for the progress, unfortunately for my work, most of them ran through a couple of firmware updates already. So the things I have started to record are not longer, well, kind of valid anymore. So I may have to redo this, or I may have to change the whole concept and see how we can have a nice comparison of those pretty nice SID replacements. And a new Ultimate 64 firmware is available as well. So I was talking about this a few weeks ago, and there's already a new version available, which I started to, well, kind of test. And I have some special Ultimate 64 project coming soon, hopefully. So this is going to be kind of a short outlook for the next, hopefully, weeks. And well, basically that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. As usual, I will add most of the links of the things I have mentioned in this video in the description section. I'm sorry. I'm not going to provide a download link for Super Mario Bros. For, well, obvious reasons. So please do not ask, and please find it for yourself. And that's basically all for today. So as usual, thank you very much for watching, and see you for the next episode. Bye bye.